Hey! So the JMT gets a lot of attention as one of the great hikes in the US, because it is. What I don't like is how often it's portrayed as an epic undertaking of enormous scale. I mean, most plans talk about hiking the trail in around 20 days, which requires several resupply points and a lot more vacation than most people have. But that's not how everyone hikes the trail. Personally, I have never hiked the JMT in more than 12 days. And I think that with proper preparation, it's reasonable for fit people to hike the whole trail in 12 days. If you can squeeze logistics into one day on either side of your trip, then that means you can do the entire trail in the 2 weeks of vacation that most Americans get each year. If the idea of covering the 215-mile length of the JMT in just 12 days seems outrageous, let's talk about some numbers. In the summer, days are usually 14 to 16 hours long, and if you could average 1.5 miles per hour for just 12 of those hours, you could cover the 18 mile per day average required to hike the 215 miles in 12 days. Since the lower 110 miles of the trail have no resupply points immediately off the trail, a large bear can holds about 5 days of food, and you can carry your first day's food outside of the bear can. This pace also allows you to avoid hiking 15 miles round trip to resupply at Kearsarge Pass, saving a day by skipping that resupply. But now we need to temper some expectations. This isn't something where anyone can just walk up and hit it out of the park. At minimum, this requires you travel around 18 miles per day and climb around 4,500 feet per day. If that weren't enough, adding side trips such as Half Dome, camping restrictions, resupply location hours, and the fact that hitting this timeline basically requires you clear 2 passes in 1 day at some point, and you end up with some much harder days. I would expect that most people trying to complete the trail in 12 days will need at least 1 or 2 days of something like 22 miles and 6,000 feet of elevation. In other words, I'm not saying this is easy. I am saying that this is possible and achievable for people who adequately plan and prepare to hike the trail in 12 days. And since that's a little fluffy, let me put it this way. People who can jog a half marathon on flat ground without walking and have recently gone on a few overnight backpacking trips can probably get to this sort of pace in about 6 to 12 months of reasonable effort. People who can already run 15 plus miles with 5,000 plus feet of elevation gain, or who have gone on 10 or more days of backpacking in the last year or two, can probably get to this pace in 6 months or less. But people who still think that this sounds a little crazy and are maybe just watching this out of curiosity or boredom or whatever, should probably still plan on at least a year or two. For context, my story is that I had a background in multi-day backpacking trips, but I had no gear and hadn't gone recently. While I was in good enough shape to hike 15 to 20 miles with a few thousand feet of elevation gain, it wasn't something that I'd done much of, and I would generally feel pretty smoked the next day. With that as a starting point, it took me about a year of concentrated effort to figure out my gear and get in good enough shape to hike the JMT in around 12 days. I didn't have a lot of focused guidance, and my plan was half improvised. So I'm hoping that these videos will help take some of the guesswork out of the planning and preparation for other people considering a similar hike. The last note I'd like to leave you with really only applies to the people who can actually go much faster than this. Most people are probably already boggling a little bit, but trust me when I say there are people who can cover upwards of 50 miles and tens of thousands of feet of elevation per day for several days in a row. Since I live near Auburn, California and volunteer for the Western States 100 race, I probably see a disproportionate number of these people. But to these people, I would suggest not to go faster than about 10 days. At that point, there aren't any real logistical benefits, and you're just taking away from your time on the trail. The JMT is a gorgeous trail, and it's meant to be enjoyed. Even when I hiked it in 10 days, I took time to nap under a tree, go fishing, take a jillion pictures, and otherwise thoroughly enjoy myself. If I were to do the entire trail again, I would probably go in at least 12 days and plan on taking entire days off to hang out in some of the cool places hidden deep within the Sierra. Anyway, that's my pitch. As always, please like and subscribe. I'm already mostly done with the script about more detailed trail logistics, including resupplies and how to pick when you go over passes and things like that. So look for that coming up. Hit the reminder bell, comment below, and I'll catch you on the next one. Later.